Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Baking with Andrea. This week we're going to make our challah dough, and we're going to work on some braiding techniques. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take 1 1/3 cups of tap warm water. I'm going to add that into my mixer. If you don't have a stand mixer, don't worry about it. You can do it in a bowl by hand. And along with that, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast. And then I use just under 1/3 cup of sugar. I'm gonna go ahead and add that in. I'm gonna give it a little bit of a stir because I really want my yeast to feed on that sugar. Put all that good stuff in there. And if anybody's never seen yeast, that's what it looks like. And we're gonna let it sit for a couple of minutes and just feed on that sugar. And then it's gonna get nice and bubbly. And that's where all of our rising stuff is gonna happen. So while that's going, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get the rest of my ingredients together. I'm gonna need about 1 tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of salt, depending on how much salt you like in yours. I'm gonna need an egg, and I'm gonna need 1/3 cup of oil, vegetable oil. And then I'm gonna need 4 cups of, I use King Arthur all-purpose flour. You can use a combination of bread flour. You can use all bread flour. Personally, if you're gonna use bread flour, I would mix it. I would do 50% to 75% bread flour and 25% of all-purpose flour. Today, we're gonna be using all-purpose flour. I'm going to show you here what our yeast is doing. It's getting all nice and bubbly. That's what you want it to be foamy like that. How you know your yeast is live. All right. At this point, I'm going to add my eggs and my oil. I'm going to wait to add my salt because if you add your salt too quickly, you can actually kill your yeast. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my egg. So 1 egg's going in, 1/3 cup of oil, and I just go ahead and give a little bit of a mix to break up my egg yolk, and then I add my salt.
Wow.
I'm just going to start mixing this to combine it. And then I'm going to get my flour ready, and I start adding it a cup at a time. A nice level cup of flour. I'm going to just let it mix for a minute, combine, and then I'm going to add another cup. It doesn't have to be completely mixed as you're adding it until you get to your 3rd cup. Then you want it to be really combined before you add your last cup of flour. Something important to keep in mind when you're baking is that it really depends on the humidity outside. So if it's really humid outside, you may need to use a little bit more flour. If it's less humid, you may need to use a little bit less. So at this point, I've got 3 cups in here.
You have to use more flour with your dough.
Yep. If it's the more humid it is, the more flour you're going to need. So we say 4 cups.
How does air conditioning impact this?
It really depends on the humidity in your house. So I have air conditioning, but I still find that in the summer when it's super humid, I still have to add a little extra flour. Could be anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 cup more. I tend to add less and then add more as I am. Is that my 3rd cup? I think that's my 3rd cup. And then I add less. I add it slowly so I can really keep a feel for my dough. And I can show you what it's going to look like. And using the stand mixer, you really want to give it a chance to get all of that dough mixed in. I'm going to stop mine for a second and just really scrape down the sides. So all of my dough is combining. And sometimes on the stand mixers, the bottom, it gets a little bit stuck. So I just lift that so it combines it all. This is cute. My dough is still pretty sticky. I'm going to add a little bit more flour. But this is the one I'm going to go a little slower with. So Terry, you were asking earlier what the difference is between tacky and sticky. So this is sticky. It's not really coming off my finger. Tacky, if I were to touch it, would just come right off. So I'm going to add half of my 4th cup of dough and get that mixing. My 4th cup of flour, sorry. And it's a messy kitchen. I get flour all over the place. Happens to the best of us. So as it's mixing, you might start to see this where the dough splits a little bit. I don't know if you can see that. So you really want to give it a chance to mix in and combine. And then you'll see it'll slowly start to get together.
What speed do you have that on?
I have it on a 3 right now.
Okay.
And so my dough is just all combined, so I'm going to check it. And this is, I think, about ready. I don't actually need to add that additional half a cup of flour. So I'm just going to let this knead for a couple more minutes. Space cleaned up a little bit here so we can do some braiding. And so depending on the space in your kitchen, you don't need a huge space to braid. But it's really up to you. If you have a clear space, it's a lot easier to do your thing. All right, so this is done. I'm going to show you. So Terry, do you see how that came off clean? That's tacky. It's not going to stay stuck on my...
Oh, that's great.
So that's what it's going to look like. It's going to be kind of starting to get smooth. And I just kind of round out a ball a little bit. See that nice smooth dough? That's what you want it to look like. And that's how you know it's about ready to start rising. And so I just make a nice ball with it. Might do it here on the counter. And if you're hand kneading, obviously you'll feel right away. It's really easy with the stand mixer to over knead your dough. So you almost want to do it just to the point that it's almost ready and then do the last little bit by hand. And that's what you're going to end up with. Beautiful ball of dough. I'm going to put a little bit of flour in the bottom of my bowl here, just so it doesn't stick. Plop that in. A little bit more flour on the top. And then I'm going to put this, my oven is already on 375 right now, so I'm going to put this on top of a dish towel, covered with another dish towel. And the reason why I put it on a dish towel is I don't want the bottom of the bowl overheating on the stove. So I just put a little bit of something in between there. Grab this one. And this is what you're going to get after about an hour of rising. This is a double batch. All right, let's move this out of the way. And then you're just going to kind of sit it on the side. If you don't want to put it on your stove, that's fine. It might take a little bit longer to rise. So with my stove set to 375, I leave it on top an hour and 15 minutes, and then I end up with my beautiful dough. And so this is ready to go. Grab my knife. And we're getting ready to braid. So when I have a big batch of dough like this, I always have a clean dish towel on hand. I'm going to cut a little bit out of it, and then I'm going to leave the rest covered because I don't want it to dry out too much. So, and if you notice here, it's not sticking too much to the bowl. I had some extra flour on the bottom there. All right. I know we had a request for a 4 braid. Does anybody else have specific requests on types of braids they would like to do?
4's good.
4. Does anybody specifically want to do a 3 braid, or you're all comfortable with a 3?
Yeah. I'd like to see a 6
6, okay.
and rolls.
6 rolls, 4. All right. Sounds good. I'm just going to give this a quick knead here, because what I'm going to do is once I braided it, I'm going to actually let it sit and rise a second time. So I just want to get it nice and ready. Okay, let's start with a 4 braid. Take a good chunk. This is probably about a quarter of my dough that I've cut off here. I'm going to put the rest of my bowl and cover it and leave it off to the side here. So as you can see, I don't have any flour on my counter here, is because my dough is pretty good. It doesn't really need any flour, but I do have on the side in case it gets too sticky. If your dough is still pretty tacky, feel free to put a little bit on the bottom. Again, less is always more. Okay, so now the part that I find the trickiest is getting even strands. So I'm going to make a little bit of a log. I'm going to cut that in half, and then I'm going to cut each of these in half again to get my 4 strands. Two, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start making them into my strands. And when you're doing this, you want to be really gentle the way you're pulling it out. I'm kind of rolling and gently spreading it. If you spread it too quickly, it's going to contract back up and it won't stay a nice long strand. So I really want to get it nice and even. And so once I get it to a point that I'm okay with, I put that on the side because it's going to contract slightly, and then I'll go again for a second time and knead it out. Feel free, if you have any questions, to stop me and ask.
How long are your strands?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 to 8 inches. So I'm going to go back to this first one and re-knead it a little bit. It kind of contracted more than I thought it would. And you want to make sure that when you're doing them, they're about the same size. The other thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is you don't want to make them too thin. The thinner you make your strands, the narrower your challah will be. So you want to keep them a little bit thicker. Okay, so there's my 4 strands. Do you want me to braid it this way, or is it easier if I braid it sideways for you to see?
I don't know.
I think not sideways.
So not this way?
Yeah, I
This
think
way?
if we're looking straight at it.
Okay.
So this way.
I think, I don't know.
With the knot on the other side.
Yes. Perfect.
Sorry, I got to adjust I'm thinking backwards here, so just give me 1 second.
Perfect.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so this is a 4 braid challah. It might seem really complicated. I think that this is one of the easier ones. You're always going to be working with your strand furthest to the right. That's the only strand you're going to be picking up. So you're going to do an over, under, over weave. So I'm going to take this one, I'm going to go over this one, under this one, and over the last one again. Then I'm going to go back to the one on the right. I'm going to go over this one. Your challah is going to turn a little bit. Under this one and over this one. And as it turns, you can just kind of bring it back. I'm going to go back to the one on my right. Over, under, over. Back to the right. Over, under, over. Back to the right. Over, under, over. And then as you come to the end, if you can get one more out of it, it's going to be a tight one. And then you kind of just crimp it at the bottom to hold it all together and tuck it under.
Gorgeous.
And that's
Perfect.
a 4-strand challah. So pretty simple. I'm going to leave that over there. Anybody have any questions how I did
Simple
that?
for some people. Some people, need a little help.
That's okay. It just takes practice. So again, it's just taking your strand all the way over to the right. I can grab another one here and make a small one. We can do it one more time. So again, I'm going to get my 4 strands about the same size, same length. Pinch them together at the top. So I've got my 4 strands. Starting with the one on the right always. So let's say this is strand 1, 2, 3, 4. Taking strand 1 over 2, lifting up 3, under 3, over 4. Taking strand 1, now this one becomes 1. 1, over 2, under 3, over 4. And it will start to turn as you braid it, so you can always just slide it back. I'm going to take 1, over 2, under 3, over 4, 1, over 2, under 3, over 4. And there's your 4th strand. Anybody have any questions about a 4-strand challah? Okay, I'm going to do a quick 3-strand just for anybody who's watching.
Yeah, I have one question. What happens? Mine's already drying out a little bit, so it's not really sticking at the ends. Is there a
Okay.
way? Yeah.
Put a drop of water on your or oil on your finger and just use it to pinch it together.
Okay.
But literally just dip your finger in a bowl or a cup of water.
Okay. What? Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So this is a 3-strand for anybody else who might be watching. So we're always going to go over the middle. So I'm going to take my side. I'm going to go over the middle. Now this one becomes my middle. So I'm going to take my end one. You're alternating your left and your right. I'm going to take this one over the middle. This one over the middle. This one over the middle. Outside over the middle. Outside over the middle. Outside over the middle. Outside middle. Outside middle. And that's your 3-strand challah. Alrighty, now let's get into the fun stuff. So does anybody have any interest in a 5-strand challah? No. All right, we'll do that one at the end.
Why
then.
not? Yeah.
Okay, we can do a quick
Do them
5-strand.
all. Yeah.
So 5, I actually think is one of the easiest. It sounds really deceptive, but it's really one of the easiest challahs. And I'm going to show you why. So I've got my 4 there. I'm just going to add a 5th one. All right. My 5th strand's a little bit thicker, but that's okay. So you've got your 5 strands. You're going to separate them into a 3 and a 2. So I've got 3 on one side and 2 on the other. I'm going to start with my side that has 3, and I'm going to take the outermost one, bring it to the middle of the other side. Now this side is 3 and this side is 2. I'm going to take the outermost one with the 3, bring it over to the middle. Now this is my 3. I'm going to take the outermost and bring it to the middle, outermost to the middle, outermost to the middle, and that's all I'm going to do the entire time for a 5-strand challah is just bring my outermost one on the 3 sides to the middle.
That's pretty easy.
Yep. I'm just going to keep going. This one you can stretch it a little bit more. And there's a 5-strand challah. Really simple. Looks beautiful too. Some people, what they do is if they make a longer 5-strand, then they'll put a 3-strand on top of it. So it looks like a really fancy challah, but it's pretty straightforward. All right, let's get to the stuff you guys are waiting for. 6-strand.
So I just mentioned that I did a 3-strand and put a 3-strand on top of it.
Yep.
It came out lovely.
Yeah.
You know? When you cut it, it just looks like a big challah. So you know.
Exactly. Exactly. You let them rise together. Terry, you had a question about rolls. So I'm going to just show you one roll here.
And also, can you talk about like where you bake them on a baking sheet, cookie sheet?
Yep.
Or?
I'm going to show you 2 different options.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. So I'm going to make a longer, thinner strand for my roll. And then I hold it with my 2 fingers. I wind it around 2 fingers. I'm going to go under and then pull it through. I just make a little knot. And then it'll rise and it'll bake. And then you know, if you put your toppings, it gets all into the creases. It's really good. I'll show you one more time.
Do they bake faster?
Slightly, but not by much. I usually just keep them in the oven the same amount of time as I do my challah.
Okay.
Yep. So again, I'm going to take with 2 fingers, wind around, and pull it through. And there's my little roll. Other people, what they do is they'll take it and they'll wind it. They keep the middle piece up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just wind it. It's kind of like a little snake.
Okay.
Those are the 2 ways. Is anybody interested in a round challah before we get to the 6? No. Okay, perfect. So we'll do this. There's my little roll. All right, 6-strand. So there are 2 ways to do a 6-strand. One is very similar to the 4-strand, and the other one is a little bit more complicated, and they look completely different, which is really interesting. So I'm going to make a slightly longer log, split it into half, and then I'm going to split each side into a third, so I can get my 6 strands. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make my rolls. Now, if I were doing this not demonstrating, I probably would have combined this together with this. I wouldn't have split it, and I would make one larger challah. Air bubble in there. Alrighty.
Can you talk about, you had talked about this onion stuff that you do on the bottom?
Yep. So I guess you could call it an under. It's not a topping, it's an under the challah. I chop up a regular, I usually use a Vidalia onion, so a sweet white onion. I chop it up into little pieces, and then I mix it with about a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil, a little bit of salt and pepper, and I put that on the bottom of my pan, and then I put the challah on top of that, and when you bake it, it bakes into the underside of the challah.
So the onion is raw?
Yes.
And it bakes when the challah bakes?
Bakes when the challah bakes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. All right, so I've got my 6 braid here. I'm going to make 2 strands of 3. And then I'm going to combine them together. So there's a 6. Okay. Now I'm going to go, this is a weaving one as well. I'm going to take my one all the way to the right. I'm going to go over 2 strands, under the middle strand, and over 2 strands again. This one's going to turn again like the weaving one. Then I'm going to take my one all the way to the right, over 2, under 1, over 2. Go back to the right, over 2, under 1, over 2. Go back to the right, over 2, under 1, over 2. Back to the right, over 2, under 1, over 2. To the right, over 2, under 1, over 2. And at the end, you'll notice you're gonna have to start pulling a little bit more. Over 2, under 1, over 2. And I'm running out of dough here, so I'm gonna get one more. Over 2, under 1, over 2. Now, I've got a little too much dough here at the end to tie it off, so I'm just gonna chop off the ends and then just kind of meld these together. And that's a 6 strand.
I didn't know that was allowed.
Of course, anything's allowed. So that's a 6 strand. And this is a 4 strand weave. This is the 4 strand. This is a 6 strand weave.
Andrea, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Did you guys talk about baking yet and what you bake it on? Because we've tried a few times and it gets so crispy at the bottom.
Have not gotten there yet, but I will get there in a few minutes. We're going to braid one more and then we're going to get there.
How long does it take to make it?
To bake it? In the oven, about 20 or 25 minutes.
Yeah, that's not too bad. All right, so
Yeah.
we're getting to the.
Sure. We'll get there really soon. I'm going to do one more 6 strand. This one. So I am not a huge fan of this braiding. I know a lot of people like it because it's easier, but I like the look of the next one that we're going to do. So again, I'm going to get my 6 strands. Move this over here.
Since you're making so much, I'm sure you're gonna, I would think you're gonna freeze some of them. Can you talk about that as well?
You can freeze it. I don't. I deliver it to friends and family. But freezing it, freezing it, you can definitely do. I like to freeze. If I'm going to freeze, I freeze them already baked. So you're going to want to make sure it's in a sealed plastic Ziploc bag or a sealed container, and you can freeze it for up to 3 months. And then once you just take it out of the oven, let it thaw, and then put it back in the oven for about 10 minutes at 350. And it should be nice and crispy on the outside and delicious on the inside. All right, so I'm gonna get my strands going here again. Now, this one's a little bit more complicated, but again, like I said, I prefer the look of this 6 strand. It gets nice and high in the middle.
So I know not everybody's just like me is not going to remember all this, and I know that you know that. So Andrea, are we taping this? So
this is going to be recorded. It's going to be on the Temple Emmanuel YouTube page, which will be linked on the Temple Emmanuel Baking with Andrea page.
Okay. In addition,
you can find
just in case, in case, I know that when we were doing this for the Challah Bake, that there's lots of videos online.
Yep.
But they're not as good, of course. So.
Thank you, Terry. No, so the link will be there. You can also email me and I can send you the link if you can't find it. Caitlin, do you mind putting my email address in the chat box?
Yes, you got it.
Thanks. Okay, so I've got my 6 strands. This one, I'm just going to combine them straight at the top.
The menorah. So
yeah. Kind of. So, okay. We ready? I'm going to take my 2 outer strands and I'm going to crisscross them. It doesn't matter which one you put on top of the other at this point. So you just want them to be crisscrossed at the top. This next step is going to matter though. So at this point, you want to split it into 2 and 2. So you have a clear middle section here. Now I'm going to take the one that's on the top of my crisscross and I'm going to bring it down into the middle. And then I've got to replace this one. So I'm going to go on this side and replace my crisscross over here. Can you guys see that, or do you want me to redo it? Hold on. Bear with me just a second. I'm going to raise up here. Trying to get you guys a better view here. Can you see this?
That's perfect. I mean, you can't keep it like that, but that's
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I can go back and redo that step too. So I've crisscrossed. I started out over here. I crisscrossed. And then I took my crisscross that was at the top and I brought it down to the middle. Now I have to replace this crisscross. So I'm going to go to this one over here and replace it. Now I'm going to bring this side down the middle. And I have to replace the crisscross over there. I'm going to bring this side down the middle. And I'm going to replace my crisscross. And then I'm going to bring this side down the middle and replace it. Down the middle and replace. Down the middle. Sorry, this side, replace. Down the middle, replace. Down the middle, replace. Middle, replace. Middle, replace. And again, I've got a little too much at the end. And that's what that looks like.
Wow.
So you get some really nice height on this one. And it bakes up nice and beautiful. And that's it. We've got our 2 different kinds of 6 strands.
Which one do you usually make?
If I'm doing it, I either do a 4 strand, this one, or this 6 strand, the one that we just did.
That 4 is already
5 strand.
blown up.
Yep, so my 4 strand's just about done with its rise. So what I'm going to show you now is how I bake them. So I bake it 2 ways, depending on how many I'm making. So today, because we're doing, there will be, but it's going to rise for a second time first.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is today I do them on a cookie sheet, and I put a little bit of parchment paper on the bottom. You don't have to do this; it just makes for easier cleanup. And then I'm going to take a little bit of nonstick cooking spray and just give a light spray on the bottom. And then I can get 2 challahs on this. So I'm going to put one on that side and one on that side. And that's what it's going to look like. Then I'm going to do the same thing on this one. So I got a little bit bigger. Now, if I'm just doing a single batch, I sometimes do it in a throwaway tinfoil. But if I'm doing more challahs, I'll do them on the cookie sheets. So, Terry, if you were asking about the onion, if I were to do the onion, what I would have done is chopped it up, and then I would put it in a really thin layer, like a thin line in the middle. And you want to make sure that your challah drapes over it. You don't want so much that it's coming at the ends. It's not terrible, but then it just doesn't cook as well. So you're going to put it thin. It's going to come across the middle of your challah underneath, and then it's going to bake into the challah. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to let my challah sit and rise for another maybe 30 to 40 minutes. This one's almost done rising, so they're gonna go pretty quickly. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do an egg wash. So I have the same number of eggs that I have in my dough. Oh, one other thing, you can make this dough egg-free. So the recipe's on the website. If you wanna make it an egg-free dough, all you have to do is substitute an additional 1/3 of a cup of oil for the egg. So it'll be 2/3 of a cup of oil instead of the egg. For my egg wash, I'm going to use equal amounts of eggs that I have in my dough. So I have 3 eggs in this dough. I'm going to use 3 eggs for my wash. I do that with a little bit of water, beat those together, and then I brush it over with a silicone brush. With a silicone brush, I brush it on. And then depending on how long they've risen for, if they haven't risen for the full amount of time, I might let them sit for another 15 or 20 minutes, do a second egg wash, and then put them in the oven. So when I bake them in the oven, I do it at 375 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. The best way to test your challahs, and my apologies, I did not make a test one this morning because I knew we were going to make a big batch, is you lift it off, tap the bottom. If it sounds hollow, it's ready. If it doesn't sound hollow, it's not ready yet, put it in for another couple of minutes. And then you take it out and enjoy it.
So when you take it out, you put it on a wire rack so that it doesn't get, otherwise it gets wet kind of underneath, or?
So you can, I don't. I usually just lift it and raise it off the side so there's a little bit of airflow underneath.
Okay. All right.
One less thing for me to wash. But yes, I would normally raise it. So when it's cooling, I would just lift it over the side like this. So there's a little bit of airflow underneath. The caveat to that is if you're doing the onion one, just leave it flat to dry because it's already going to be moist underneath. It's just going to make it messy. Stick it in the oven, bake it 20 to 25 minutes, test the bottom. If it comes out, you get that hollow sound, then it's ready to go. Anybody have any other questions?
Andrea, what do you put it in the middle rack? Does it matter where in the oven?
So it doesn't matter so long as you've got space. So I normally do, if I'm going to do 2 of them, I have 3 racks in my oven. So I'll bring my bot here. I can actually show you guys. You see that? Might be easier just to show you.
Yep.
So I use this rack. I'll take this rack, the middle rack out, and I'll use the bottom one and the top one. But my top one is kind of in the middle. If I put them too close together, the challah won't rise properly. So if you're doing just one, I would, just one tray, I would do it just in the middle one right here. But I've got 2 trays that I'm going to do at the same time, so I'll do the middle and the bottom rack. And that'll give enough airflow around.
Do you ever use convection?
I do not.
Because I usually don't bake with it because I'm always worried about the temperature.
Yep, exactly. You have less control of your temperature.
Right.
Hang out for a second, guys. Thank you guys so much. Caitlin, I think we can shut the live off.